The staff at Cole Manor knew this well. They had learned to move quietly through the long marble hallways, to speak in soft voices, to never ask him personal questions. The house was beautiful. Tall windows. Gold light in the mornings. But it felt empty, like a museum nobody visited. 3 years ago, Ethan lost his wife, Sarah, and his baby daughter, Grace, in a car accident. Since then, he had thrown himself into his company. He worked 18-hour days. He ate alone. He slept in a room he once shared with his family, though he rarely slept well. He was only 36, but people said he had the eyes of an old man. Tired eyes. Guarded eyes. That autumn, his housekeeper of many years retired. The agency sent a new woman named Elena Reyes. Elena was 30 years old, with warm brown eyes and a tired but kind face. She had been through hard times of her own. Her husband left when their daughter was just a baby. Since then, it had been only the two of them, Elena and little Mia, moving from one small apartment to another, Elena working 2 jobs to keep them afloat. When the housekeeping agency offered her a live-in position at Cole Manor, Elena almost said no. Most families did not want a toddler running around a mansion full of expensive things. But the pay was good, and there was a small guest cottage on the property where she and Mia could live. She needed this job badly. "I promise she won't cause trouble," Elena told the estate manager, holding 2-year-old Mia on her hip. Mia had curly brown hair and bright, curious eyes. She was looking at everything, the chandelier, the big staircase, the garden outside the window, like it was all made of magic. "Mr. Cole is a busy man," the estate manager said. "He is rarely home during the day, and when he is, he stays in his office. Keep the child away from that wing of the house, and there won't be a problem." Elena nodded quickly. Of course. That first week, Elena worked hard to keep her promise. She cleaned the house from top to bottom while Mia napped or played quietly in the cottage with her stuffed rabbit. But a toddler cannot be contained forever. Mia was curious, energetic, and endlessly friendly. She loved to explore. One afternoon, while Elena was dusting the library shelves, Mia wandered off. Elena searched the halls in a panic, calling her daughter's name softly, afraid to disturb the quiet house. She found Mia in the east wing, standing outside a closed door, patting it gently with her small hand. "Baby, no," Elena whispered, scooping her up. "We don't go this way." But it was too late. The door opened. Ethan Cole stood there in a gray sweater, a coffee cup in his hand, his eyes tired from another sleepless night. He looked down at the small child in her mother's arms, and something in his face went still. "I'm so sorry, Mr. Cole," Elena said quickly, her heart pounding. "She got away from me for just a second. It won't happen again." Ethan said nothing. He simply looked at Mia. And Mia, completely unafraid, looked right back at him and smiled.
"Hi," Mia said.
Ethan's jaw tightened. Without a word, he turned and closed the door. Elena hurried away, her cheeks burning with embarrassment. That night, she barely slept, worried she might lose the job. But the next morning nothing happened. No warning, no complaint. Just silence like always. She did not know that behind that closed door, Ethan Cole had stood frozen for a long time, staring at the space where the little girl had been. Mia's curly hair, her round cheeks, the way she said hi so easily, so happily. It reminded him of Grace. Grace, who never got the chance to say her first word. He hadn't let himself think of his daughter that clearly in a long time. It hurt too much. He had built walls around that pain, brick by brick, until he almost forgot what it felt like to feel anything at all. That night, for the first time in months, Ethan didn't work until 2 a.m. He sat in his study with the lights off, thinking about a little girl's smile, and did not understand why his chest felt so tight. Over the next several days, he noticed things he hadn't noticed before. The sound of small footsteps in the garden. A child's laughter drifting faintly through an open window. A tiny drawing, crayon on paper, that had somehow ended up near the kitchen door, a lopsided sun, a green scribble that might have been grass, and 3 stick figures holding hands. He didn't know why he picked it up. He didn't know why he kept it in his desk drawer instead of throwing it away. He told himself it meant nothing. But some part of him, some old, buried part, was starting to wake up. Winter came slowly to the estate, turning the gardens gold, and then bare. Elena settled into a routine, and true to her word, she worked hard to keep Mia far from Mr. Cole's wing of the house. But keeping a 2-year-old contained was like trying to hold water in open hands. Mia had taken a special interest in the goldfish pond near the East Garden, and more than once, Elena found her standing at the glass doors that led to Ethan's private study, watching him work with wide, patient eyes, as if he were the most interesting thing in the whole world. "Mia, come away from there," Elena would whisper, pulling her gently by the hand. Mia would wave at the glass. "Bye-bye, mister." Ethan never looked up, or so Elena thought. In truth, he noticed every single time. He told himself he was simply distracted by the noise. That was the excuse he gave himself when he found his eyes drifting toward the garden doors during his calls, watching a small girl in a yellow coat chase butterflies that weren't really there anymore, since it was too cold for butterflies, but she chased the memory of them anyway, arms out, giggling at nothing. There was something about her joy that unsettled him. He had forgotten that people could be that happy over something so small. One gray Tuesday afternoon, Ethan came home early, an unusual thing for him. His driver dropped him at the front steps, and as he walked toward the door, he heard humming. Off-key, cheerful humming, coming from behind a hedge. He almost walked past it, but something made him stop. He peered around the hedge and found Mia sitting alone in the dirt, patting the soil with her small hands, arranging pebbles in a circle like she was building a tiny kingdom. Her knees were muddy. Her yellow coat had a grass stain. She looked completely content. "What are you doing?" The words left his mouth before he decided to say them. Mia looked up, unbothered by his stern tone, the way adults were always unsettled by him but children somehow never seemed to notice. "Making a house," she said, pointing at her circle of stones. "For the beetle." Ethan looked down at the pebbles. Sure enough, a small black beetle sat in the middle of the circle, seemingly unaware it had just been given real estate. He didn't know what to say. He hadn't spoken to a child in years, not since Grace, and even then, Grace had only been 4 months old. He had no practice with this. He started, then stopped. "That's a nice house." Mia beamed like he'd given her the greatest compliment of her life. "Do you want to help?" she asked, holding out a pebble. "I have to go inside," Ethan said quickly, stepping back. Mia's face fell just slightly, but she didn't argue. "Okay, bye, mister." He walked inside without looking back, but his hands were trembling slightly as he set down his briefcase. He went straight to his study and sat at his desk for a long while, staring at nothing, before he opened the drawer where he kept the crayon drawing. 3 stick figures, holding hands. He wondered, not for the first time, who they were supposed to be. Elena found out about the encounter later that evening, when Mia excitedly told her about the sad mister who almost helped build a beetle house. Elena's stomach dropped. "You spoke to Mr. Cole?" she asked carefully. "He's sad," Mia said simply, as if this were obvious information, the way a child might say the sky is blue. "I gave him a rock, but he didn't take it." Elena didn't know how to respond to that. She tucked Mia into bed that night thinking about it. Sad. Was that the word for it? She had noticed it too, in the brief moments she passed him in the hallway. The heaviness behind his eyes. The way he moved through his own house like a guest who didn't belong there. She decided, once again, to keep Mia away from him. It felt safer that way, for everyone. But children have their own plans. Over the following 2 weeks, small moments kept happening, brief and accidental. Mia leaving a dandelion on the doorstep of his study. Mia waving through car windows when he left for work. Once, she left a single sock, her own, tiny and covered in cartoon ducks, on the front step, for reasons no one, including Mia, could explain. Ethan found himself, without meaning to, starting to expect these small interruptions. He noticed when a day went by, without one. He noticed the quiet more. One evening, his assistant, a sharp, no-nonsense woman named Patricia, who had worked for him for 8 years, found him staring out the study window at the garden, an unread contract sitting untouched on his desk. "Everything all right, sir?" she asked. Ethan blinked, as if waking from a dream. Fine, he said. Just thinking. Patricia glanced toward the window, where a small yellow coat could be seen disappearing around the hedge, Elena chasing after her daughter with tired laughter. Patricia said nothing. But she had worked for this man long enough to know that something, however small, was beginning to shift. That night, for the first time since the accident, Ethan Cole dreamed. Not of the crash, not of sirens or hospital hallways, but of a small hand reaching for his, and a voice that wasn't quite Grace's, and wasn't quite a stranger's either, asking him something he couldn't quite hear. He woke up with tears on his face, and didn't understand why. The day everything changed started like any other. It was a Saturday in early December, cold and bright, with frost still clinging to the grass in the shadowed parts of a garden. Elena had the day mostly to herself, since the house was quiet and Mr. Cole was, as far as she knew, locked away in his study working, as he always did, even on weekends. She let Mia play in the back garden while she hung laundry on the line near the cottage, keeping half an eye on her daughter as she toddled around chasing a bright red ball. What Elena did not know was that Ethan had stepped out onto the terrace that morning for fresh air, something rare for him, holding a cup of black coffee he wasn't really drinking. He needed to clear his head. The anniversary of the accident was approaching, and it always made the walls of the house feel tighter, the silence louder. He was standing near the stone railing when the red ball rolled across the lawn and bumped gently against his shoe. He looked down. Then he looked up. Mia came running after it, out of breath, cheeks pink from the cold. She skidded to a stop when she saw him, looking up with those same wide, unafraid eyes she always had. "Hi, mister," she said, scooping up her ball. "Hello," Ethan said quietly. She didn't run off right away this time. Instead, she studied him for a moment, tilting her head the way small children do when they're deciding something important. "Are you still sad?" she asked. The question hit him like a small, unexpected wave. Nobody asked him that. Not his employees, not his board members, not even his own mother, who had learned long ago not to bring up feelings around her son. "I don't know," Ethan answered honestly, surprising himself. Mia nodded seriously, as if this made perfect sense. She sat down right there on the frosty grass, arranging her ball beside her, completely unbothered by the cold, the way children often are. "My mommy says when I'm sad, playing helps," she said. "Is that so?" "Yeah." She looked up at him again, studying his tall frame, his stiff posture, the careful distance he kept even while standing still. Then her face lit up with an idea. "Will you be my horse?" Ethan blinked. "What?" Mia stood up, patting her small hands against her knees like she was preparing for an important task. "A horse. You're big. Big like a horse." She said this with complete confidence, as though she had thought this through very carefully, and this was simply the logical conclusion. "I'll ride you, and we go fast." For a long moment, Ethan didn't know what to say. Nobody had asked him to be anything in a very long time, except efficient, except profitable, except strong. Nobody had asked him to be a horse. He should have said no. He should have gone back inside, back to his study, back to his contracts and his silence. That was what the old Ethan would have done. But something in the little girl's open, hopeful face stopped him. "I've never been a horse before," he said slowly. "That's okay," Mia said, completely reassuring. "It's easy. You just go like this." She dropped onto all fours in the grass and made a small, terrible neighing sound, giggling at herself immediately. And that was it. That was the moment. Ethan Cole, billionaire, CEO, a man known in every boardroom in the country for his ice-cold composure, set down his coffee cup on the stone railing, loosened his collar, and got down on his hands and knees in the frosty grass. "Like this?" he asked, and made an attempt at a neigh that was somehow even worse than Mia's. Mia burst into a fit of giggles, so big she fell backward into the grass. Elena, hanging laundry near the cottage, turned to the sound of her daughter's laughter and froze completely at what she saw. Ethan Cole, on his hands and knees, with Mia now climbing carefully onto his back, gripping the collar of his sweater with her small fists. "Go, horsey, go," Mia squealed. And then, the sound that made Elena drop the shirt in her hands. Ethan Cole laughed. Not a small laugh. Not a polite chuckle. A real laugh, deep and surprised and a little rusty, like a door being opened after years of staying shut. He crawled slowly across the lawn with Mia giggling wildly on his back, both of them red-faced from the cold and from joy, and the sound of his laughter rang out across the quiet garden. Patricia, who had come outside to bring him a folder of documents, stood frozen at the terrace doors, her mouth slightly open. In 8 years, she had never once heard that sound. Elena stood by the laundry line, hand pressed to her chest, tears rising unexpectedly in her eyes. She didn't know if she should stop this, apologize, pull Mia away. But watching him, watching the way his shoulders had lost their permanent tightness, the way his face had transformed into something almost boyish with happiness, she couldn't bring herself to interrupt. Mia patted his shoulder like a tiny rider guiding a great horse. Faster, horsey. Faster. Yes, Your Highness, Ethan said between laughs, and picked up his pace across the frosty grass, snow-white breath puffing from both of them in the cold morning air. For 10 whole minutes, the coldest, quietest house on the hill was filled with laughter, real and loud and alive, echoing off the stone walls that hadn't heard such a sound in 3 long years. When it was finally over, Ethan sat back on the grass, breathing hard, his gray sweater covered in frost and mud, his carefully combed hair a complete mess. Mia climbed into his lap without asking permission, the way small children do, and rested her head against his chest, tired out from all that galloping. Ethan looked down at her, and something in his chest, something that had been frozen solid for 3 years, cracked wide open. He didn't move for a long time. He just sat there, in the cold garden, holding a little girl who wasn't his, feeling something he hadn't let himself feel since the accident. He felt like a father again. That afternoon changed something between them, quietly but permanently. Ethan didn't go back to his study right away. Instead, he found himself walking Mia back to the cottage, her small hand wrapped around one of his fingers, chattering the whole way about beetles and ball games and a cat she had once seen in a picture book. Elena met them at the door, still stunned, still unsure how to act around the man who signed her paychecks but whom she had spoken maybe 10 sentences to in total. "Mr. Cole, I'm so sorry. She must have bothered you." "She didn't," Ethan said quickly. Too quickly, maybe, judging by the surprised look Elena gave him. He cleared his throat and tried again more evenly. "She didn't bother me at all." There was a long, awkward pause. Mia, uninterested in adult silences, tugged on Elena's sleeve. "Mommy, Mr. Ethan is my horsey now." Elena's eyebrows shot up. "Mr. Ethan?" Ethan gave a small, embarrassed shrug, something Elena would have never imagined him capable of just an hour earlier. She insisted. That night, Elena couldn't stop thinking about what she'd seen. The image stayed with her, this powerful, guarded man, laughing like a boy in the frosty grass, letting a toddler climb all over him without a second thought. It didn't match anything she'd heard about him from the other staff. They called him cold, distant, a man married to his work. She hadn't known about his wife and daughter. Nobody had told her, out of respect, or perhaps because it simply never came up. It was Patricia, a few days later, who finally explained it gently, over tea in the kitchen. "He lost his family 3 years ago," Patricia said quietly. "A car accident. His wife, Sarah, and their daughter, Grace. She was only 4 months old." Elena's chest tightened. She thought of little Mia, of the fierce love she had for her daughter, and tried to imagine losing her. She couldn't. The thought alone made her eyes sting. "He hasn't been the same since," Patricia continued. "None of us have seen him laugh. Not once. Not in 3 years. Until yesterday." Elena sat with that information for a long time after Patricia left. She thought about the crayon drawing Mia had made weeks ago, the 3 stick figures holding hands, and wondered if Ethan had kept it, and if he had, what it might have meant to him. She was right to wonder. That drawing still sat in his desk drawer, now joined by a small, muddy pebble Mia had once tried to give him, which he had quietly kept without ever telling anyone why. Over the following weeks, something shifted in the rhythm of the house. Ethan began coming home earlier, not because his workload had lessened, but because some part of him now looked forward to the sound of small feet running across the garden, to the sight of a yellow coat weaving between the hedges. He and Mia developed their own small rituals. He was her horse on Saturday mornings, without fail, rain or frost. He learned, slowly and clumsily, how to braid her hair when Elena was busy, though the results were usually lopsided and always made Mia giggle. He kept a small stash of crackers in his desk drawer for when she wandered into his study, no longer scolded away but welcomed, if quietly, with a chair pulled up beside his desk where she could color while he worked. Elena noticed the changes in him too, not just with Mia, but in himself. He began eating dinner in the kitchen sometimes instead of alone in the dining hall. He asked Elena, hesitantly at first, about her life, her daughter, what had brought them here. She found herself opening up in return, telling him about Mia's father leaving, about the hard years of working 2 jobs, about how tired she'd been before this house, this strange, beautiful, sad house, had somehow become the first place in years that felt like it might become home. One evening in late December, as snow fell softly outside the tall windows, Ethan found Elena in the kitchen after Mia had gone to sleep. He stood in the doorway for a moment, unsure, before speaking. "Thank you," he said simply. Elena turned, surprised. "For what?" "For your daughter." His voice was quiet, careful, like he was still learning how to talk about this. "I didn't think I'd feel anything like this again. I didn't think I wanted to." He paused, looking down at his hands. "She reminds me of my daughter. Not in how she looks, just in how she loves. So easily. So completely." Elena's throat tightened. "Grace," she said softly. "Patricia told me." Ethan nodded, his jaw tight. "I stopped saying her name out loud. It felt safer that way. Easier." "You don't have to stop," Elena said gently. "Not here." He looked up at her, and for the first time, she saw not the powerful, guarded businessman, but simply a grieving father who had been alone with his pain for far too long. "Grace," he said again, testing the word like it was something fragile. His eyes filled, and he didn't try to hide it, not this time. "She would have been 3 this year." Elena crossed the kitchen without thinking and placed a gentle hand on his arm. He didn't pull away. "Mia was born the same year," Elena said softly. "Maybe that's why. Maybe some part of you recognized something." They stood there in the quiet kitchen for a long moment, snow falling silently outside, 2 grieving hearts finding an unexpected kind of comfort in each other's company. It wasn't romantic, not yet, not exactly. It was something simpler and, in its own way, more profound. It was the beginning of trust, the beginning of healing, the beginning of a family neither of them had expected to find. Spring came to Cole Manor slowly, the way it always does after a long, hard winter, first in small signs and then all at once. The garden that had been frozen and bare when Mia first arrived was now bursting with color, and it had become, without anyone officially deciding it, the favorite place in the whole estate. Ethan had installed a small wooden swing beneath the old oak tree, something he'd built himself over several clumsy weekends, refusing every offer from the household staff to hire someone to do it properly. "I want to build it myself," he told Patricia, who had simply raised an eyebrow and said nothing, though she smiled the whole way back to the house. Mia was 3 now, taller, chattier, with an ever-growing vocabulary and an ever-growing love for the man she still, and would always, call Mr. Ethan. Their Saturday morning horse rides had become legendary among the staff, who often gathered quietly at the windows to watch, though Ethan pretended not to notice. Elena had become more than the housekeeper. Over the months, she and Ethan had grown close in a way neither of them had expected, slow and careful, built not on grand gestures, but on small ones. Shared dinners. Long conversations on the terrace after Mia went to bed. The quiet comfort of 2 people who understood loss in a way most people never had to. It happened gradually, the way real love often does. There was no single dramatic moment, no sweeping declaration. Just a growing certainty, present in the way Ethan's eyes softened whenever Elena entered a room, and the way Elena found herself looking forward to his return each evening, listening for his car in the driveway. One warm evening in May, Almost exactly a year after Mia had first asked her strange, wonderful question in the frosty garden, Ethan found Elena on the terrace, watching Mia chase fireflies across the lawn in the fading light. "I have something to ask you," he said, his voice carrying a nervousness Elena had rarely heard from him. She turned curious. "What is it?" He reached into his pocket, and for a moment, Elena's heart caught, wondering if this was the moment she thought it might be. But instead, he pulled out a small, worn piece of paper, carefully preserved, its edges soft from handling. It was Mia's crayon drawing, the lopsided sun, the green scribble of grass, the 3 stick figures holding hands. "I found this on the kitchen floor almost a year ago," Ethan said quietly. "I've kept it in my desk ever since. I didn't understand why, not at first. I think some part of me already knew, even then, what I wanted, what I was missing." Elena's eyes filled with tears as she looked at the drawing, the 3 small figures her daughter had made, without any thought of what they might one day mean. "I know it's fast," Ethan continued, his voice thick with emotion. "I know grief doesn't follow a schedule, and I know I'm still learning how to be a father again, how to let myself be happy. But being with you and with Mia, these last months have brought me back to life in ways I never thought were possible. I'm not asking for anything grand tonight. I just want you to know that. I want you to know what you've both given me." Elena wiped her eyes, laughing softly through her tears. "You had me worried for a second there." Ethan smiled, that same rare, warm smile that had once been reserved only for a toddler asking him to be a horse. "There's plenty of time for the rest," he said gently. "For now, I just wanted you to know how much this family, the one we've built without ever planning to, means to me."
Family.
The words settled over the terrace like something sacred. Mia came running up at that moment, breathless and glowing, a firefly cupped carefully in her small hands. "Mommy, Mr. Ethan, look." She opened her hands slightly, revealing the tiny, glowing light inside, and both adults leaned in, marveling at it with the same genuine wonder as the child holding it. "It's beautiful," Elena said softly. "Can we keep him?" Mia asked hopefully. "I think he needs to go back to his family," Ethan said gently, kneeling down to her level. "But we can let him go together, if you'd like." Mia nodded seriously, and the 3 of them walked to the edge of the lawn, where Mia opened her hands and watched, delighted, as the firefly lifted off into the darkening sky, joining hundreds of others blinking gently across the garden like scattered stars. Ethan Cole, once known throughout the business world for his cold composure and guarded heart, stood in his garden that evening with the woman who had somehow found her way past every wall he'd built, and the little girl who had broken through those walls entirely with nothing more than an innocent question and an open heart. He thought of Grace often still. He always would. Her memory lived quietly in his heart, no longer a source of only pain, but of gentle, tender love. He had learned, slowly, that healing didn't mean forgetting. It meant making room, somehow, for both the grief and the joy to live side by side. And as he watched Mia run back toward the swing beneath the old oak tree, laughing, alive, unaware of the profound gift she had given a broken man simply by asking him to play, Ethan Cole felt something he thought he had lost forever.
He felt whole again.
Later that night, tucking Mia into bed while Elena finished the dishes, Ethan sat by her small bedside for a long moment after she'd fallen asleep, watching her breathe, the same way he used to watch Grace. "Thank you," he whispered into the quiet room, not entirely sure who he was thanking. Grace, maybe. Or fate. Or a little girl who had simply asked a broken man to be her horse, and in doing so, had carried him gently back to life. Outside, the fireflies continued their slow, glowing dance across the garden, and inside the house on the hill, for the first time in 3 long years, there was laughter that never truly stopped again.